I'm Ronald Mair. I'm the Chief Executive of Scottish Care. Scottish Care is the umbrella body for care homes and care-at-home services across the country. So, as such, very involved in the agendas around end-of-life provision. I am, however, acutely aware that what we don't want at this point in the day is death by PowerPoint and anybody keeling over between now and lunchtime. So try not to subject you to too much of the PowerPoint. We have to start with this, just picking up now, because it's inevitably, in the kind of discussion we've had this morning, there's a lot of personal reflection. That's what people have been doing. Have been thinking about their experience. And I suppose for me, slightly mixed thoughts came into my head. I was born and brought up on the south side of Glasgow. Father was a minister there. My mother was a children's doctor. My mum's favourite phrase, if we ever had any kind of ailments or conditions, was, "Don't worry, there's a lot of it going around." And my father used to say that he could imagine, phoning my mum and saying, "Isabel, I'm dying." And she would say, "Don't worry, Stan, there's a lot of it going around." So I think I was kind of brought up with a kind of familiarity around some of the issues to do with death and dying. It was part of the family business, if you like. But certainly too, my mother's own end of life. She had a series of strokes. She was very debilitated by that. And she felt acutely the lack of dignity at end of life. Spent the last 6 months in a care home because, frankly, she needed 24-hour nursing care. They were very good. And the local GP was very good, and we did, actually, this is 12 years ago, but we were talking, I suppose, about advanced care planning. What should we do? What did we want? My mother shouldn't be shipped off to hospital if it came to the end, that it would be better if she could be in the care home, and the care home did indeed, when she was deteriorating, call us to say that they felt it was near the end, and we were able to be there. So I feel it's very important that we provide quality of life for people at the end of life. I want to kind of, suppose, with this bit of the discussion today, to move away from just exactly how do we define death and who's in control of that. We could spend a lot of time and energy around that, and maybe not spend enough time, I thought, in what constitutes quality of life during the latter part of somebody's life, because I think we've got to do both, and not just focus on who's in control at the end of that, at the end point. And I think certainly in terms of end of life choices, where are people going to be? What's the quality of that experience going to be about is hugely important. So I want to say something about where the social care dimension fits into this. There's an awful lot happening around care of older people at the moment. It's very high profile with the government and with councils and health boards. Some of it for the wrong reasons. I'd like to think it was all driven by the desire to provide better care for older people. Sadly, I think some of it's driven simply by how much the government anticipates is going to cost, and the kind of demographic challenge as they see it. I worry, because we talk about a demographic challenge, a demographic problem. Older people are not a problem. Our society could not operate without its older population. Older people, as you well know, deliver more care than they receive. It's older people that are looking after each other, are doing the bulk of the volunteering in our society. are part of good neighbour schemes, and who are picking up the wains from school so their children can work. That's what older people are doing. They're an asset, not a problem, and we must not forget that, and get into this idea that older people are some sort of problem, because sadly, that could tip the balance, as if, older people don't deserve the quality of life and the quality of care that we would want for them. So we've got to be looking at the terms of the dialogue about about care of older people. There is correctly, though, a focus on how do we shift the focus from an emphasis on the acute sector care, hospital-based care, to care in people's own homes, and care in, if that's no longer viable, care in alternative settings, including care homes. There's a correct drive around bringing the professionals together, creating a more integrated service. You may remember last year there was the case in Aberdeen. I think it was Mrs. Maitland, whose husband had dementia. And she had counted the number of professionals that came through the door in the last year of her husband's life. And I think it came to way over 100 people. In fact, I think she said that when the 100th person had turned up, she baked a cake to celebrate that's not what people want. That people want continuity of care. They want to know the people who are dealing with them. So we have to achieve a higher level of integration. Personalisation. What could be more personal than end of life? And the choices that people can make. So our services have to be ones which are tailored to the needs of individuals, not that the individual has to fit into the service. And so we have to make sure that that's at the heart of what we're doing. Frankly, I think, so I won't dwell too much on this, but we are going to have to spend more money on care of older people. We can do a lot of fancy footwork in terms of trying to make the resource base go further. But at the end of the day, we have to decide. Do older people matter enough such that we are going to invest society's resource in providing for people in the latter stage of their life? So, and we have a framework of quality and regulation. People expect the best and deserve the best, and we have to make sure that that's there. So what are the things that are important to me in terms of the social care dimension to this? So what's happening in care homes? What happens in care at home? Well, for a start, it should be a positive choice where you are at end of life. I worry that care homes, general picture of care homes is unfortunately rather a negative one, and people kind of see it as a last resort, not necessarily somewhere where I would want to be, because I would have company, because there would be a sense of community around me, because I might have 24-hour care. We've created a kind of image that being in your own home at all costs would be good. Being in some other care setting would be less good. I think that's rather unfortunate. If being in your own home is at a stage of social isolation, where you can't get out, and maybe you don't have a great number of people coming in, if you have a succession of home carers coming in increasingly on very short visits, 15-minute visits. My mother-in-law at the moment gets home care, and the carer comes in the morning with between 15 minutes and half an hour to see that she's up, that she's, even when she doesn't want to get up, she just pulls the blankets over her bed and says, "Fuck off, I don't want to get up this morning, why should I?" So you know, where's personalisation is about positive choice. Should I have to get up at 8 o'clock because the carer has 20 minutes to make sure I'm up, I've had some breakfast, I'm dressed, I've had my morning medication? That isn't positive care. So I think people should be able to remain in their own homes as long as possible, but with quality of life, with social connectedness. And we're going to have problems because part of our demography is not just the number of older people, but it's the social mobility that means families are no longer living round the corner. So some of the informal care is maybe not going to be there in the future to the extent that it is. So we're going to have to make sure that people aren't just in isolated domestic situations. And for me, yes, at a certain stage, there's a positive choice to be made about being in a care setting. We certainly have to get the anticipatory care planning right. People should be encouraged, whilst they still have the capacity to do so, to say what they want at the end. To try and do something about my health and fitness, I took up running recently. My son, who's a consultant at one of the hospitals in Edinburgh, immediately made sure that I filled out the DNA CPR forms and the organ donation forms. His level of optimism about his father's sporting prowess. So that's fine. I'm well signed up. But we should be looking at the scenarios and rehearsing those scenarios, and people have talked about that this morning in terms of everybody getting better at having those discussions in families. I'm trying to get my mother-in-law to take up bungee jumping, and so we should be having these discussions about what scenarios we can see in front of us, what are the anticipatable situations, and how do we make our views known about what we're going to want. Whether one goes down the route of the Liverpool Care Pathway, the Gold Standard Framework, or any of the other approaches to end-of-life care, it is important that all staff in care settings are aware about the issues and are able to respond to the issues. So the training element is important. Of course, there has to be concern about people being too readily put onto a particular trajectory that anticipates end of life. So I agree. I agree with some of the concern that's been there. But as a framework for raising awareness amongst professionals about the needs of individuals and their families at end of life, I think we have to have that. We need to improve the quality of training and awareness. We have to be more joined up. We have to make sure that if we are trying to provide, certainly in care home settings, good end-of-life care, that local GPs are very involved in that process, hospital consultants, in some situations, yes, CPNs and other people who may be coming in. So the whole business about joining up on what we're doing becomes hugely important. There are issues about the facilities and equipment in care homes. What's the resources for families to come in and be there? Have we got good family rooms? Can families stay overnight, for instance, if somebody is at the end of life? What are the opportunities within the care setting for that to be responded to? Do we have the necessary equipment and training, syringe drivers, just-in-time medication? Do we equip within the social care setting people to be able to meet needs adequately at end of life? Have we rehearsed the issues with other residents? One of the things we've noticed is that, correctly, people are staying in care homes more to end of life. The last thing I actually would want is to see people move from the care home to hospital at end of life. What's the gain? Unless there's some clinical need that could only be met in the hospital setting. Elizabeth didn't, I think, touch on it specifically, but I mean, at the moment in Scotland, we still have over 55% of people who die in hospital. Not people who have gone in for life-threatening illnesses or something and sadly haven't survived, but actually people go into hospital to die. Hospitals are not good places to die. I know there was the poem which Elizabeth read, somebody had experienced the hospital very positively, so I wouldn't want to detract from that. But in general, I would say that there would be more dignity if we have the support to people to die in their own homes or in other care settings. That's likely to be more conducive to end-of-life care. But we have to therefore invest in those and resource those settings to do that job. Yes, there's good. For once, I'll hold off on a rant about the funding of social care. We do need to spend more on it. If you actually think a general hospital bed is running at the moment over £1,400 a week, an acute hospital bed over £3,000 a week. And what do we fund a care home at? £560 a week if it's got nursing care, £480 if it doesn't. What do we fund children's homes at? £2,500 a week. So why are we spending a whole lot more on children in care than older people in care? And if we do want to keep people in community settings rather than in hospitals, we need to invest some of that resource. But those are arguments which, as you can imagine, I pick up with the politicians. But standards have to be there as well. If we are going to use social care more as part of the whole end-of-life approach, then people have to be reassured about the quality of that. And again, that's a dialogue with our colleagues in the media about how they present the issues around the quality of care. Correctly, there is public concern, and the public has a right to reassurance about standards. We actually in Scotland have quite a robust regulatory framework. That doesn't mean to say it's foolproof. It doesn't mean to say there aren't situations where it appears to fail. But in general, we have a robust regulatory framework. But we have to work hard to reassure people about the quality of any care coming into their own homes, or if they are in a care home setting, the quality of that care. So we may need to introduce more standards relating specifically to end-of-life care in those services. The development of positive partnership approach, it seems to me self-evident in a sense that if we're going to make progress on this, and about the quality of, you see, not just what happens at the last minute, but what's happening over the last months or the last year, then you need a positive partnership between the local authorities and the health boards. It's very particularly, obviously, with the service users themselves and their carers, but also all this myriad of people that are involved in the delivery of care, because it's a very wide sector. The third sector, the voluntary sector, the private sector, care homes, care at home, housing support, housing associations, hospices, counselling services, a whole range of people, stakeholders in this. So getting the act together, and I think some of that was what was triggered by Living and Dying Well as a policy framework. That was the attempt to say, let's have a fresh approach to this in Scotland. Let's get a joined-up approach at local level. I think we have made some progress, but I think we still have ways to go in ensuring a joined-up approach at end of life. We are at a time of severe financial pressures in the public, in terms of the public finances. But here's an area where we jointly have to be advocates on behalf of older people, on behalf of the quality of care provided at end of life. So thank you very much.